إن الحمد لله نستعين ونستغفر ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا ومن يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. السلام عليكم. Inshallah, we'll make a start. So last week we discussed about the hardship which Prophet ﷺ had to endure himself, other than the Sahaba, and we went across few of the stories which were there, and then we quickly discussed about Darul Arqam, that once there were like 20-30 new Muslims, Prophet ﷺ wanted to actually have a secret meeting place for all the Muslims where they can come and learn Islam without being prosecuted by the Quraysh and without having any harm. So that was the house of Al-Arqam, Ibn Al-Arqam, who was from Banu Makhzum. He was a young man who had a biggish house, and it was just after behind Mount Safa, and we discussed there were many reasons for Prophet ﷺ to choose that house. And this is the place where lots of Muslims have accepted Islam, and the famous story of Umar al-Faruq radiallahu ta'ala anhu, where before he accepted Islam, when he wanted to come and kill Prophet ﷺ, and then he went to his sister's house, and then his heart changed and he came to see Prophet ﷺ, which we kind of briefly mentioned last week. That was Al-Arqam. So that was Darul Arqam, where he came and accepted Islam. So that was Darul Arqam. So the next thing was that even after all of that, when the hardships on the new Muslims came to a point where it was pretty much impossible to live in Mecca anymore, so Prophet ﷺ asked them to migrate to Abyssinia, which is Habasha, modern day Ethiopia. So that's where, and the reason why the Prophet ﷺ, there's a hadith that says that there's a land become too constricted, why don't you immigrate to Christian land of Abyssinia for those who want to? The king there is a just king who will let you worship without any trouble. So Prophet ﷺ asked them, why don't you go to Abyssinia, because there is the Christian king who's a just king, and you will be safe there to live your life and be a good Muslim without any hardships, or without any people coming and kind of prosecuting them just because they are Muslims and they are saying that Allah is their Lord. And in the Rajab of the 5th year of Dawah, so that's not the 5th Hijrah, so it's the 5th year of Dawah, in Rajab, 15 people actually immigrated, 11 men and 4 women, two couples. One of them was Uthman ibn Affan, which is the 3rd caliph, we all know about him, and his wife Ruqayyah, which is the daughter of the Prophet ﷺ. Anybody can tell me what was the laqab of Uthman? He was known as Dhun Nurayn. Tell us why, for everybody's benefit.
Nurayn means the possessor of 2 lights, and he married 2 of the Prophet ﷺ's daughters.
Yeah. So because he married 2 daughters of Prophet ﷺ. So one was Ruqayyah, and so he was married to Ruqayyah, and he was one of them who immigrated to Abyssinia, the first immigration. Abdurrahman ibn Auf was another one. Uthman ibn Maz'un was another of the Sahabi who immigrated. Zubair ibn al-Awam, who is the cousin of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Musab ibn Umair, Abu Salama and his wife Salama, they all immigrated. And there's another couple, Amir ibn Rabia and his wife Layla. They immigrated as well. Prophet ﷺ made Uthman ibn Maz'un their leader, so he was the Amir of this little group of 15 people. So there's an interesting story that Amir ibn Rabia and his wife Layla, they were preparing to immigrate, and Layla, she was basically packing up the bags and loading them on their mount. And Umar Razil anhu, he passed by them. So he saw her packing and he asked, "Where are you going? Why are you leaving? Where are you going?" And she was already very sad about leaving Mecca because that's their home. And according to one of the surveys a few years back, people, 95% of the people will be born and die within the 20 miles radius of their home, where they are born, of their father's home. So that was their life. So nowadays, in my own life, I have lived in different countries, and since I've been in England, I've lived in so many different cities. But back then, that was your possession, because there was no bank transfers or anything, so you can't really transfer your money to a new place and go and live there. So everything you have to carry on your back or on your mount to take with you. So all your possessions are there with you. So leaving Mecca and going and living in some strange place was a big thing, was a really difficult thing for them. So she was really sad about leaving Mecca. And Umar Razil anhu, he passed by and he said, "What happened? Why are you going? Why are you packing your stuff?" And she snapped and she said, "It's all because of you that we have to leave Mecca." Obviously, not just because of him, but I mean, she snapped at him. And he said, "Oh, has the matter reached that level that you have to leave, you have to immigrate? May Allah bless you and take care of you in the journey." So that's when I was saying that he had a soft heart. He had a very strong and hard outer persona, but he had a very soft heart. So when she snapped at him, he took back and he said, "Oh, is the matter gone to that place? I never actually realized that our prosecution and torture has come to the point that you guys are leaving now." So he actually blessed her and prayed for them for the journey and left. And she got really shocked. And when her husband came back, Amir ibn Rabia, she said, "Oh, let me tell you, Umar, I saw a very changed Umar. He came and he saw me packing the bags and leaving, and I said this, and he was very kind of kind to me, and he might be actually, his heart might be changing." And Amir ibn Rabia said, "Wallahi, the Himaru Bayti Khattab." So the donkeys of Khattab's house will accept Islam before Umar can do that. So he was a very strong enemy of Islam. But subhanallah, he actually did accept Islam. So Allah accepted him. So they left for Abyssinia, and just after 3 months, all of them came back. And that comes the story, which is one of the quite tricky one in the Seerah. In terms of it's a sensitive subject. It needs discussion, detailed discussion, which we will go through inshallah today as much as we can. And that's, let's quickly do that. Wisdom of choosing Abyssinia. As the Prophet ﷺ said that his king was a just king and you will have a freedom of worship. Abyssinia was familiar to Quraysh because they were going for their trade, so selling and buying stuff. So for their trade journeys, they were going to Abyssinia a lot. It's an easy passage couple of days to Jeddah, and then it takes few hours from Jeddah to Abyssinia. So that's another reason why Abyssinia was chosen. So it's not that it's too far away from Mecca. So it's far, but it's not far away. Um, and they are Christians, and the Christians are much closer to the Muslims, as we know, because of the monotheistic belief. And we think that Najashi, who was the king of the Abyssinia, he was the true monotheist Christian, because when Jafar went there, radiallahu anhu, and he told him about the Isa, what we believe about Isa, and recite Surah Maryam. Najashi said, yeah, exactly, this is exactly what Isa is, so nothing more, nothing less. So we believe that he was one of the monotheist Christian. So the next one is the incidents of satanic verses. So we all have heard this name, satanic verses. Does anybody know what actually satanic verses are? So
Is that something to do with Shaitan?
it is something to do with Shaitan, yes. It says satanic, so yes. Um, um,
I'm glad she didn't say this August.
yeah. So there's this book of which names satanic verses, but we won't go into that detail. So shortly after leaving Makkah, Abyssinia, so like in Shawwal, so they left in Rajab and came back in Shawwal, so about in 3 months' time. So they all came back. And why did they come back? There was a rumor that all the Quraysh have accepted Islam. So they said,
Sorry.
no, please.
There's a lovely incident where Jibreel alayhi salam was standing next to the Prophet, and the 5 mockers were the way they were dealt with. Is that to come, or is that?
Which one?
The 5 people who used to mock all the time, and Jibreel alayhi salam stood next to Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and how he dealt with those 5 mockers.
No,
One
not
of them
yet.
he threw a green leaf and he went blind. One of them he.
That incident has a. To be honest, I'm not very familiar with that one, but I will look up, or you can tell us more.
It's just all I know is that there were 5 mockers, Jibreel alayhi salam, while they were going through the circumambulation of the Kaaba, and they really were quite horrible. And one had I think cut or somewhere, and that got infected and he died. Another one had a problem with something happened to his head and he died. The way in which the 5 died is just quite, for young people to listen to is amazing actually. And first one is
you will find the story when you read the ayah إِنَّا كَفَيْنَاكَ الْمُسْتَهْزِئِينَ. When you go to the meaning of the Quran, there is a verse in the Quran, إِنَّا كَفَيْنَاكَ الْمُسْتَهْزِئِينَ, which means we've got rid of those who were sarcastic towards you. And they will list all these 4 who Jibreel was hitting one after the other. Is this one of them? And Jibreel used to hit them. Nice
I just
story.
thought maybe I was.
Yeah, it's not this one, but I mean, as I said, means I'm not very familiar with that story, but I will look it up, inshallah, bring it. But there was one which we discussed last time, that when Prophet ﷺ was, they put the entrails of the dead carcass on Prophet ﷺ's back when he was prostrating, and he stood up and he named all of them and prayed against them. So Abu Jahal and Umayyah ibn Khalaf, and there were Utbah ibn Rabi'ah and Shayba ibn Rabi'ah, and all of those people, 7 people, and they all got killed in Badr. So Allah took care of them. So this was the rumor. Why was the rumor spread? So there are 3 versions. Version 1, no problem, easy. So which is mentioned in Bukhari. That's the most authentic one. So it's mentioned in Bukhari. So that's the hadith. It's narrated by Muhammad bin Bashar that Hazrat recited Surah Najm, which is 103 at Mecca, and prostrated, because it ends with the verse of sajda, and he recited, and when he finished he prostrated, and when people saw him prostrating, they all prostrated, Muslim, non-Muslims, everybody. So rumor got spread that everybody has accepted Islam because they all prostrated with Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So the rumor got spread that they have accepted Islam, although that wasn't the case. So that's the version 1, which is the most authentic one, and that's the version which has been mentioned in most of the Sahih books, Sahih Bukhari and other Sahih books. There's another. There are, by the way, there are 4 Sahih books for of Hadith. So 2 which everybody knows, so Sahih Bukhari and Sahih al Muslim. Does anybody know the other 2?
Ibn Majah?
No, it's not a Sahih. It's one of the Kutub Sitta, one of the 6 famous books, but it's not one of the Sahih books.
What do you mean?
From the Kutub Sitta, there are only 2 Sahih books, Muslim and Bukhari. So the others have Sahih Hadith, and there are some weak Hadith as well. So they are not all Sahih Hadith. So the other one is Ibn Hibban. So Sahih Ibn Hibban and Sahih Ibn Khuzaymah. So these are the ones which are the 4 Sahih books. So all the Sahih books have mentioned this, and Ibn Ishaq, Ibn Hisham, they have mentioned these books, this story. So there is no mention of anything else, no satanic verses, nothing. So easy, straightforward. So the story in more detail is that Prophet ﷺ was reciting Surah Najm one day, and I mean he was building up, and Surah Najm is a very powerful surah. And it was like developing like a narrative, and it was building up, and everybody was listening. Even the Quraysh and the non-Muslim Quraysh was listening as well, and they all got overwhelmed with their emotions. And as soon as Prophet ﷺ prostrated, they all prostrated with him, except one person, which was Umayyah bin Khalaf. He just picked some dust and put it on his forehead and said, "That's enough for me." So that's my prostration. He didn't even get down to prostrate on the floor. He just put some dust and that he said, "That's it." So that's what which is mentioned in this hadith as well. So he was the one who just put some stones and some dust on his forehead and just said, "That's it." And then in the hadith it says that this is I saw him killed as a non-believer, and from that people have said that some of the scholars said that it is necessary to prostrate when you hear the sajda ayah. So there are few ayahs which are sajda ayahs, and when you hear them, you're supposed to prostrate them. And that's when we are reading Taraweeh. The Qari used to say, "Oh, there is a sajda in second rakah or something," and then when he recite that ayah, he goes straight to the sajda, and we all go to sajda with him. But then there are other ahadith which says that Hazrat heard us or recited a sajda ayah, and he didn't actually prostrate. So you don't really, it's not fard to do that, but it's advised to do that. Whenever you hear a sajda ayah, you should prostrate. So that's I've just actually put a little bit of Surah Najm at the last few verses just to get an idea what it says. So and it says, "And that is he who enriches and suffices, and that is he who is the Lord of Sirius, and that he destroyed the first people of Ad and Samud, and he did not spare them, and the people of Nuh before. Indeed, it was they who were more unjust and oppressing, and the overturned towns he hurled down, and covered them by that which he covered, and then which the favors of your Lord do you doubt? This is the warner like the former warners, the approaching day has approached. Of it besides Allah, there is no remover. Then at this statement do you wonder, and you laugh and you weep, while you are proudly supporting. So prostrate to Allah and worship. So that's the last ayah. And he prostrated straight after that, and everybody prostrated with him. So the rumor spread that everybody accepted Islam. It reached Abyssinia. They were already very homesick. They were finding it difficult to live in a strange land. They just hold on to that rumor, and they all came back. They said, okay, let's go back. Now comes the version 2, which is a little bit more problematic. So it says that it's not present in the most famous hadith books, but it is found in At-Tabari, At-Tabari's tafsir. When At-Tabari was writing the tafsir, he's one of the big names. So we don't think that At-Tabari is not a big scholar. He's one of the biggest scholars. But when he was writing the tafsir, he said that himself, that I am writing the tafsir for scholars. It's not for lay people. So I'm just writing an encyclopedia. I'm collecting everything and anything. So I'm just collecting everything and putting it in my book for the scholars to sift through it and dissect it, research on it, and just work on it. So he basically wrote an encyclopedia. Whatever he found, he put it in his book. So it wasn't that he was looking for authentic things. So he just put everything, whatever came to him, he just collected and wrote in his book. So that book was basically meant for the scholars, so that they can work on it and can look for the authentic things in it and do their research and do their work on it. So that was for academics. The problem is, so the thing is that these are present in our books. So these satanic verses and these stories, the non-Muslims, they've taken it and they've just really used it, exploited it, but they have taken it from our sources. So it's not that they have invented it. So it's present in our sources. So it's come from, the story goes back to Urwa ibn Zubair, who is one of the Tabi. We discussed Urwa, who's the son of Zubair ibn al-Awwam, who's the cousin of Prophet ﷺ. He is not a Sahabi, he's a Tabi'i. And the chain of narration ends at Urwa ibn Zubair. So there is no Sahabi mention. So that's why it's a weak hadith. So there is no mention of the Sahabi. So we don't know who he heard it from. So that's why it's been considered as a weak hadith. And in this one, it says, then when Prophet ﷺ was reciting Surah Najm, when he recited verse 19 and 20, have you not seen Lath and Al-Uzza, and the third one of them, Al-Manat? Are you going to, and the next surah which we know of is that, are you going to get the males and you will give him the females? But Shaitan cried out just before this one. So when it says, have you not seen Al-Lat and Al-Uzza and a third of them Al-Manat, the Shaitan cried out that these are the mighty cranes or pelicans, and their request will be granted. So he added these two verses in the recitation of Prophet ﷺ when he was reciting Surah Najm. And when the non-Muslims, the Quraysh, heard, they thought that it's Prophet ﷺ who is reciting, but it wasn't him who was reciting. It was the Shaitan who actually said in his own voice. And the Muslims didn't hear that, but the non-Muslims heard that, and they went to prostration with the Muslims, thinking, looks like Prophet ﷺ has accepted our gods as well. They had no problem accepting Allah anyway, because they knew Allah and they believed in Allah, but they just wanted their Lats and Manats to be included as well. So they thought that Prophet ﷺ has come to a compromise. He has accepted our gods as well. Let's prostrate with him. So that's the second version. Again, not very difficult to swallow, because Prophet ﷺ didn't knew anything about this. Shaitan said a couple of verses, non-Muslims heard. So yeah, but that can happen. We don't know, but it's not that difficult to swallow this. We can accept that version as well. Lots of scholars actually have accepted this version, and some of the big names, earliest scholars, have accepted this version. Now come the more problematic version, and that's the version 3, which is found again in Al-Wahidi. None of the major books have mentioned, but Al-Wahidi has mentioned this one. And this version says the Prophet ﷺ heard the shaitan said those 2 verses, and he thought that it's the Jibreel who's saying it, so he said it in his own voice. So he said the 2 verses, those 2, that these are the pelicans, these are the mighty pelicans, and their intercession will be accepted. So he is the one who said it. So that comes a big problem now, and that's why it's called satanic verses. So the name satanic verses actually comes from Sir Williams, who's one of the Western scholar, researcher. He said that because the shaitan is mentioned, so we will name it satanic verses. In Muslim tradition, in our books, it is known as Qissatul Qaranik. So Qaranik is been mentioned, and the Qaranik is like pelicans, the mighty pelicans. So that's what is mentioned. So satanic verses is not the names which we have come up with. So that's the coming from the non-Muslim books, from the Western books, from the Western the scholars. They have mentioned the name satanic verses. So why is it a problem? So in the version 3, why is it a problem?
The Prophet ﷺ recited it himself.
Yeah. So what's the problem?
Or you can claim that the rest of the verses the Prophet may have heard shaitan say them thinking it's Jibreel.
Yeah, he said that's a big thing, that the way he can be corrupted. So where he is corruptible, that's the problem. So that's what they take in this that the Prophet ﷺ can't differentiate between shaitan and Jibreel. So what else he hasn't differentiated? What else he has told us which is not from Jibreel? So that's, you can understand where the problem starts, and they can actually take it, and they can take it to whatever level. So the version 3, basically Jibreel Islam, in the more detailed version 3, when he said that, Jibreel Islam came back and he said, what have you done? What have you just recited? And Prophet ﷺ recited the whole thing again, and he said, but I never told you this. And he was really worried. It was really sad and worried that he has said something which is not from Allah. And then Allah has mentioned that وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِنْ قَبْلِكَ مِنْ رَسُولٍ وَلَا نَبِيٍّ إِلَّا إِذَا تَمَنَّى أَلْقَى الشَّيْطَانَ في الأمنية فينسخ الله ما يلقي الشيطان ثم يحكم الله آيات والله عليم حكيم.
This story came in 2 different narrations. One of them is the Prophet ﷺ never said the words,
Yeah.
but the people heard it from,
Yeah. So that was the version
not from
2.
the Prophet.
So yeah, so that's the version 2 which we mentioned. So that's where Shaitan said non-Muslims heard the verses. The Muslims didn't hear anything. So Muslims just heard what Prophet ﷺ was saying, and non-Muslims heard the story. And the third one is that Prophet ﷺ said himself. So that's the version which is the more. The thing is that some of our earlier scholars have actually accepted this version as well.
The word, I'm sorry to interrupt again. The word umniyatahu, that shaitan wish, not umniyat the Prophet. The umniyatahu umniyat shaitan. Shaitan wishes that the Prophet will become what he was hoping to become.
Yeah.
And Allah Azza wa Jalla doesn't allow him.
So, I mean, the thing is that there is why we have to accept that. The problem is that lots of scholars have accepted it, not just one, but the biggest name probably is Sheikh Al-Taymiyyah. You probably have heard all of him. He's one of the big scholars. So why he think that he accept that? He said that because of this ayah in Quran, in Surah, this is Surah Hajj, verse 52, that Prophet, when Prophet ﷺ was really sad, this ayah was revealed because of that. That whenever we sent a messenger or a prophet before you, O Prophet or Prophet, he recited our revelation. Shaitan would influence people's understanding of this recitation, or they have said Shaitan would try to put something into the recitation. But eventually Allah would eliminate, Allah will do the nasakh for what Shaitan has influenced, and Allah would firmly establish His revelation.
But he doesn't clarify whether this was post the delivery of the message. So it could get distorted after the message has been sort of relayed, right?
But
So
that's the thing.
This was when the message was being relayed. They're effectively the same. That
This ayah is not in Surah Najm. That's a different ayah.
Yeah.
That's after that. So Allah is actually kind of consoling Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. If we take but the problem is that the word tamanna. So it's وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ مِنْ قَبْلِكَ مِنْ رَسُولٍ وَلَا نَبِيٍّ إِلَّا إِذَا تَمَنَّى. So tamanna in Urdu speaking people. So we know tamanna means to wish,
Desire.
to desire, to wish. And that's the same meaning in Arabic as well. So in today's tamanna means to desire, to wish. But there is another meaning of tamanna, which is present at the time of Prophet ﷺ, and there's lots of poetry where tamanna is used in that meaning, is to recite. So that's the thing. So if we take tamanna to wish, no problem. This verse has got nothing to do with satanic verses then. So that Prophet ﷺ wishes something, and Shaitan tries to manipulate his wishes, and that's the thing. According to those scholars who accepted version 3, they translate tamanna to recite, not to wish. And it is a valid translation of tamanna. In fact, in the earliest Arabic language, tamanna was initially used to recite, but later on the secondary meaning was added, which is to wish. So that's why they said, well, it's in Quran, and it's very clear why this ayah has come. But the scholars who rejected it, they said, no, tamanna here doesn't mean to recite, it means to wish, and this ayah has got nothing to do with satanic verses. This is completely separate ayah, this is a completely separate topic, so you can't combine the two.
So because we didn't have a context for what that ayah meant then. Is that why there's a difference of opinion?
It's
Because
in
some of
Surah
the
Hajj.
verses yes.
It's and it was most of the Surah Hajj was revealed during the Hijrah, but it doesn't mean that all the ayahs were revealed, because we know that some of this. So we don't know the exact context of this particular ayah, but according to those scholars, this is the context. So they give this as a context, so the other thing.
Sorry, in psychology, it's known that sometimes people hear what they want to hear. It's not what you say.
Yeah.
And that could be one of the things which was happening. They wished that the Prophet said
that.
about their
Yeah.
gods that they are accepted.
Yeah.
And they heard it and they frustrated.
Yeah.
But the Prophet
But means
said,
the only argument against that is that if lots of people heard it, then you can't really apply that with them, because not everybody would be thinking the same thing.
there is an ayah when the Prophet ﷺ said he was dictating one of the Sahaba to write, and the ayah about the creation of man. Then at the end, the ayah will end, فَتَبَارَكَ اللَّهُ أَحْسَنُ الْخَالِقِينَ. So while this guy was writing, then he said, after the Prophet finished, before he said, فَتَبَارَكَ اللَّهُ أَحْسَنُ الْخَالِقِينَ, he said, this person, he said, فَتَبَارَكَ اللَّهُ أَحْسَنُ الْخَالِقِينَ. So Prophet Muhammad said to him, write it, because Jibreel just came with that specific verse. So that guy thought that he is receiving revelation like the Prophet, and then he became kafir. And then he left and he started pretending to be a prophet or whatever. So the language which the scholars say that sometimes, yes, you could expect that to happen, but might not be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the scholars which actually the group which goes for version 3, they said this is very clear that this tamanna here means recitation because of the next verse, which is لَيَجْعَلْ مَا يُلْكِ الشَّيْطَانُ فِتْنَةَ الَّذِينَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ مَرَضٌ وَالْقَاسِيَةُ قُلُوبُهُمْ وَإِنَّ الظَّالِمِينَ لَفِي شِقَاقٍ بَعِيدٍ. Which means, and that, so he may make Satan's or Shaitan's influence a trial for those hypocrites. Hearts are hardened, surely the wrongdoers are totally engrossed in opposition. The reason why this ayah makes it the meaning of tamanna recitation, because other people must be hearing something so that their heart is, so this is a trial. Ooh, what happened here now? It's coming. So because if it's just about the wishes and desires, why would it be a trial for the non-believers, as this ayah says, that I will make it a trial for the hypocrites and the non-believers whose hearts are hardened. So unless they hear something, it's been communicated to them, it can't be a trial for them. That explains, that makes sense?
No, Shaitan have waswasa.
Yeah.
Shaitan has what we call whispering.
Yeah.
And Allah limited his ability to
whisper only.
Yeah. So that could be what Shaitan did, and Allah will just remove it.
Yeah. So, but they said, sorry, go ahead.
So in the ayah they use, does that because this verse is also used to say, for example, these Orientalists or these people who read the Quran with their own agenda, with their own, their test is that however many times they read the Quran, they will not see the guidance. But in the previous verse, is that saying the Shaitan will influence what the Prophet ﷺ is saying, or is that he will influence
what people have heard, what people have heard, and they have understood the wrong meaning? So about those two verses.
Himself, then?
No, but there's version 2 and 3. There are two versions, so both versions goes there. So, but there is a theological dimension in this discussion, which is the sanctity of the Wahi. Allah has He's taken the sanctity of the Wahi on Himself, and there's lots of verses where Allah said that I will protect the Quran, I will protect the Wahi. So that kind of gets in the doubt. Now, for the argument's sake, the scholars, do they not believe in the sanctity of Wahi? Obviously they do. Their argument is that Allah has protected the sanctity of Wahi. Allah has abrogated those two verses. Allah has made it clear, and we know that, the whole Ummah knows that those two verses are from the Shaitan. So Allah has protected the sanctity of the Wahi. So why can't we accept that it happened?
Even the worst scenario has been removed by Allah.
Yeah, so that's why they said, well, even if this is the third version, we accept that. That's absolutely fine. Then comes that all the prophets are masoom, that they cannot make any sin, they cannot commit any sin. So that's what isma or the masoom means, and that's the theology. And all the prophets are masoom, but their definition of masoom is different. So their definition of masoom is the prophets cannot commit any major sin, they cannot lie ever, they can not commit any fawahish, any lewd or vulgar sins, but they can commit minor sins, because
it's the worldly. They might make mistakes in the worldly things, like
worldly
pollination
thing.
of the trees and things. but not a sin to disobey Allah.
Means there's an argument for that as well, that which is what Adam did. Allah stopped him. Allah told him not to eat from that tree, and he ate, and that's why we are in dunya. We are not still in Jannah. So that was, and then he
wasn't
repented.
Prophet. In Jannah, he wasn't prophet.
Yeah, but he was a prophet, and they are masoom even before they get the prophethood. So the prophets are masoom before their
Because
prophethood.
if it was, Musa killed the thing.
Yeah, so but that's
He
what.
wasn't the prophet.
No, true, but means the theology of being masoom goes beyond just the prophethood. They are for their whole life. So they masoom. I mean, that's my understanding of
Yeah, that's
masoom.
where the scholars differ.
Yeah.
Because the same when Ibrahim, he was asked who broke all these
Yeah,
statues.
and he
He said,
asked this
This
one.
big one.
And-
He wasn't prophet either.
Yeah. So, but me, that's the thing that according to those scholars, masoom is for their whole life. They are masoom, not just for the prophethood. But they don't lie, never. So that's covered with masoom. They don't cheat. They don't cause any major sins. They don't cause any fawahish. But the minor sins, minor mistakes can be done. And the biggest example of for the Prophet ﷺ, Seerah himself would be when he was reprimanded in Quran after Badr for the prisoner of wars, that he said we should not kill them, and then Allah revealed that this was not the best of the judgments. You should have basically killed them, because that was what Umar Radiallahu anhu's advice was, that we should kill all the prisoners of war. Abu Bakr said no, we should not, and he went with Abu Bakr's advice, and then Allah revealed in the Quran, which we will inshallah discuss when we will cut there, that this is not the best of the, and it was slightly harshly reprimanded Prophet ﷺ in the Quran for that incident. So yeah, means they can make mistakes. Probably sins might not be the right word, but they can make mistakes. So this is a mistake which Prophet ﷺ has made according to them, and this is absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
What's the mistake though?
That he so he recited the version, the two ayahs
Yeah.
about the
Shaitan.
shaitan, which shaitan has said.
You just mentioned that, I mean, that even in the ayah previously in Surah Al-Hajj, you mentioned that the ayahs there, verses, that mention that the prophets are not being influenced by shaitan, the people are being influenced.
No, that's the thing. The ayah didn't say.
The shaitan with the Prophet ﷺ was also Muslim. He became Muslim, the shaitan that was with the
No, that
Prophet.
we're not talking about his Qareen. We're talking about the big shaitan, Iblis. So that was the Iblis himself who did that. So
Not
it wasn't the
jinn,
Qareen.
Not
Or
jinn.
his influence
Not
in the
it
people
wasn't
is
his
the ayah.
Qareen. No, so that's
the wording mistake we mentioned earlier. The brother mentioned that they asked him, should we pollinize the trees or not? He said it doesn't make any difference, and they didn't, and didn't have any crops. So he said you should know more about your worldly life. And the second one, I think you mentioned as well,
about the Badr as well.
the prisoners of
Yeah,
war,
war.
that he accepted the ransom, while Umar ibn Khattab suggested that they should be executed. And in fact, many of them came back to fight again.
Mm.
So if they were executed, they would have, aborted the second war.
Mm.
But that also, there's two different interpretations.
Interpretations, yeah. So scholars have differed on that as well. So, but this one is in this one, this ayah, it basically says that it's not just you, the prophets before you, the shaitan has tried to influence their recitation. If we take tamanna's meaning as recitation, so the shaitan has influenced their recitation, and we have abrogated what shaitan has influenced, and we have firmed our wahi. So that's what this ayah means. So according to the scholars which take version 3, they would say this tells us exactly what happened in satanic verses incidents. So they will link this ayah with the satanic verses.
So
Is it clear?
those verses, where are they actually? Where are those verses?
Those are different surah. That's a different surah. They say that because Prophet ﷺ recited that, And when Jibreel came back and he asked, "What have you done? What have you recited?" He said, and he recited the whole thing again. And he said, but I never told you to recite these two verses. So then he realized that it's the shaitan who has inspired me to do that. And he was really worried and he was really sad that I've made a mistake, that I've said something from the shaitan's inspiration. Then he was so worried. Then Allah revealed this ayah for Prophet ﷺ to console him that don't worry, it is not just you who have been affected by the shaitan. Previous prophets, when they recited, shaitan tried to influence their recitation as well, but we have abrogated what the shaitan has influenced and we have formed our wahi. So don't worry, we will abrogate this one as well and we will make it clear. Which happened, which did happen. So everybody is clear.
This verse come straight after.
We don't know. We don't know exactly, for
What
sure.
they heard واللات والعزى وإن شفاعتهم لترتجى. That's the intercession of Lat and Uzza would be expected.
Yes.
It is not part of the Surah Al-Najm.
Yeah. So that's.
They heard these verses and they went into sujood. When Allah Azza wa Jalla said, "Fasjudu lillahi wa'budu," they said, okay, so He accepted our Lat and Uzza, and we're accepting His God, Allah, so we will prostrate with Him. And that's where the story is.
So these the two satanic verses were that these are the mighty pelicans. So Qarani kul ula, and Allah will accept their intercession. So that's what Shaitan added, those two verses. So the Prophet ﷺ, according to one version 1, which is the most authentic, Bukhari and all of that, none of this happened. So Prophet ﷺ was reading Surah Najm. He finished the Surah Najm. He went to prostration. Everybody prostrated with him because they were all got emotional because of the Surah Najm and it was building up. So that's the most authentic version. Okay, so there is no mention of satanic verses whatsoever. Version 2, Shaitan said himself, the two ayahs which we are talking about. So two verses, sorry, not the ayahs. The two verses which we are talking about. So Shaitan said himself in his own voice, and people heard, but they thought that it's Prophet ﷺ who is reciting those verses as well. And Quraysh thought, okay, means he's accepting our, as Dr. Alam said, he's accepting our gods, so they prostrated with him. In version 3, Shaitan managed to actually put that into Prophet ﷺ's mind, and Prophet ﷺ said himself those two verses. So that's why third version is the most problematic. That he could.
This third version. Where is this third version?
Where is the third version? This comes from Al-Wahidi, book of Al-Wahidi. So that mentions the third version. And there are scholars afterwards who have accepted that third version. And Ibn Taymiyyah is one of the biggest names who have accepted that version.
Because accepted it's part of the Quran, they've accepted that
this happened. They didn't accept it that it's let to make it clear that they didn't accept it as a part of Quran, but they accepted that Prophet ﷺ said it, and then Allah abrogated those two verses, and He came clear and made it clear that these are the two verses which are not part of Quran. This is from the Shaitan, and it made it clear.
When they speak, when we went through this story in the other book of Seerah, they say that was early in the Islamic history, so no one was able to give exactly what actually happened. But the Muslims were very few of them, and that become distant memory. So they try to think that was happening or that or that.
Yeah, and just the Arabs weren't good at writing anyway. So
they were not writing the Seerah.
Yeah, they were not writing.
Quran,
yeah, they were not writing these things. So some people would have been writing some parts of the Quran, which comes back to how the Quran was compiled. But in terms of Seerah itself, like the Arabs weren't writing these incidents.
Yeah, and the thing is that these are the versions which the other thing is that all the ahadith which mention this third version, they're all weak ahadith. So there's more than one. They're all weak ahadith. Um, the thing is that Ibn Hajar, who is one of the biggest scholars of Bukhari, Sahih al-Bukhari, he is one of the biggest scholars of Sahih al-Bukhari, Ibn Hajar, he actually said that if you take all those weak ahadith, which mention this version 3, put them together, it will become Sahih. Does it make sense? So there is a rule in
It depends
Usul
where
al
the
Hadith.
weakness is.
Yeah. So that's
Weakness here, then
Yeah.
it become Hasan.
yeah. So if I mean, I will try. So this is a hadith. So that according to Usul al Hadith, this is a hadith. So it starts from top here, Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, then Sahaba, then Tabi'i, then Taba Tabi'in, then other people, and this is the last person. So Bukhari, say for example, has heard it from this person who has heard from this. So if this chain is complete,
Sanad.
they're all, this is what the sanad is called sanad, and they're all strong people. They're all very pious people. They have got strong memory. So this hadith will be sahih. Okay, so they have to. So it's ilmu rijal and isma'u rijal. So that's one thing where they actually study the people who are telling the hadith
The character.
and their character and everything, and then they make sure that these people were present in that era and they have seen each other, they have met each other. So there's a very detailed science about it, and when they meet everything, they will call it a sahih. That's an authentic hadith. In this one, in this particular hadith, it starts with Urwa. No, not here. Here, which is one of the tabi'is. So there is no sahabi mentioned. So this is a missing link. So there is no sahabi mentioned. So nobody knows who's told from Prophet ﷺ to Urwa. So there is no one in between. So there is a generation gap. So that's why it's a hadith is weak. Then there is another version where probably there is a sahabi, but there is a weakness somewhere here. And then there is another version where there is a weakness here. So there is another version where there is a weakness here. So if you combine all those weak ahadith, the whole chain will be completed and it will become a sahih. So that's one of the usul al-hadith, and that's true. And there's lots of ahadith which are considered sahih because of that. But then it doesn't apply to all the hadiths. It doesn't apply with all the time. Because I'm not going to go into too much detail of usul hadith, because that's not the scope of our discussion. Yeah, and it's already 10 past. So, but there's Albani, which is another muhaddis, mostly from our time. He has written a whole book that about this version 3, and he has explained why it doesn't fit with all these ahadith, and we cannot apply that rule to these particular hadiths. So it will still not be an authentic hadith. So according to him, it's still not an authentic hadith. So basically, was
his view version 1 is correct then?
Yeah, version 1, everybody understands that and everybody accepts that. Version 2, some people accept that. Version 3, very few other people accept that as well. So if somebody accepts version 3, it includes version 2 and version 1. So they have got no problem accepting version 2 and version 3, because version 3 has more detail than 2 and 1.
So who rejects version 3 then, and which of the scholars?
Lots of scholars. So Qazi Iyad is one of the big names from our time. Ibn Huzaymah, which I mentioned, one of the 4 Sahih books, Ibn Huzaymah, he said that this is a fabrication which has been fabricated by the enemies of Islam. That's his words. And there's lots of other scholars who have rejected this one. There was actually a conference, Islamic conference, the whole Islamic world, the scholars from the whole Islamic world, they gathered in 1960. There's an annual conference. And in 1960 or 65, can't remember, this was the topic. So the whole conference was done on this particular topic. And in the end, the conclusion was that this is not true. This is not authentic. So we should reject this.
So why are we talking about it in the lesson?
It's still books. It's still in the books. and still used by Orientalists.
Because incidents
So-
happened.
So,
Because
so
the Sahaba who were in Abyssinia, they came back. Because they heard that the Qurayshi accepted Islam
yeah,
and they made the sujood.
yeah,
So it was correct incident.
Oh, the incident.
Yeah. And they came back and then went back again, the
Again.
second immigration to Abyssinia.
and people, because I mean in other places maybe that you are right, we should not even mention that, but here in this environment where people would use that and would make you start thinking and doubting your religion and deen, then I think we should know these things in more detail so that we can defend it properly with proper knowledge. So we will just discuss a little bit more inshallah next week. May Allah bless you and accept this effort from us and protect us when we leave from here. Any other questions before we finish? Any burning question, because I can see that its time is already